Hey everybody, welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going all the way to India to take a look at the world of dairy farming there, specifically in the Jabalpur district of Madhya Pradesh. And for this one, we've got a research article with quite a long title. It's called Constraints Perceived by Dairy Farmers in Adoption of Recommended Dairy Practices and Suggestions to Overcome Constraints in Jabalpur district of Madhya Pradesh. But don't worry, we'll break it all down for you. The insights in this paper are really interesting. I think you'll find it worth exploring with us.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that this region, this Jabalpur district, it kind of acts as like a microcosm of the bigger trends in the Indian dairy industry. It's a sector with huge potential, but there are some serious challenges facing these farmers.
You always hear about the poor potential of India's dairy sector. Like it could be a real driver of economic growth, especially in rural areas. But then you hear about all these challenges facing the farmers there. So if that's the case, what's holding these farmers back?
Well, one thing to consider is the sheer scale of demand. By 2020, India's demand for dairy was projected to reach somewhere between 131 and 158 million tons of milk, which is just a crazy amount. And simply increasing the number of cows isn't a good solution, not a sustainable one at least.
So how do you meet that demand? Without just flooding the country with cows, it seems like a real puzzle. The study mentions that a big issue is the non-remunerative price of milk. Can you tell us a little more about what that means?
Yeah, basically non-remunerative price means that the money farmers get for their milk isn't enough to cover the costs of production, so they're not making enough profit to keep their operations going, let alone invest in improvements or anything.
Oh, so unless farmers can earn a decent living from this, the entire dairy industry in India is at risk.
Absolutely. And it's not just about making ends meet. They need to be able to invest in things that would increase their productivity and efficiency, like high-yield crossbreed cattle.
Speaking of crossbreeds, the study mentions the high cost of these animals as a major obstacle.
Right.
Can you tell us a little more about that?
Well, yeah, so think of like breeds like Holstein Friesians or Jerseys. Those are the ones known for producing a lot more milk than indigenous breeds. But they come with a high price tag. Many farmers just can't afford to buy them, especially with the milk prices being so low.
It's a tough situation. You need these higher-yielding breeds to meet the demand, but they're expensive, and the milk prices aren't high enough to make it worth it for the farmers.
Exactly. And then on top of that, there are a bunch of practical challenges specific to this region in India, like storing milk in the intense summer heat without good cooling facilities. Spoilage is a huge problem.
That's not something we think about too much here, but I imagine that's a daily reality for these farmers. What are some other issues they're dealing with?
Well, another big hurdle is having a reliable supply of fodder throughout the year. You need consistent, good quality feed to keep the cows healthy and producing milk. But access to fodder can be unreliable, especially during the dry seasons.
So you've got low milk prices, expensive cows, storage challenges, inconsistent feed supply. That's a lot to juggle all at the same time.
It is, and we're only just getting started. The study also mentions limited access to financing, high vet costs, difficulties accessing artificial insemination, which, by the way, is a technique to breed cows without a bull physically present.
Wow. It sounds like a whole web of interconnected challenges facing these farmers.
Yeah, for sure. But the research also highlights some pretty cool solutions proposed by the farmers themselves.
Okay, so after all these obstacles, what are some of their suggestions? You mentioned they had some clever ideas.
They do. And remember, these aren't just theoretical solutions. These ideas are coming from people who live and breathe dairy farming every single day.
This is where it gets really interesting. Let's dive into those solutions. What are some of the key things these farmers are advocating for?
One of the most common things you see is a call for more government support. They're asking for things like subsidies for essential inputs like veterinary medicines, feed, fodder seeds, things like that.
So that sounds like a direct way to help alleviate some of that financial pressure they're under. Subsidies could potentially make a difference in their bottom line.
Exactly. But they want more than just financial help. They're also pushing for infrastructure improvements, especially for things like milk collection and marketing facilities.
Okay, so what would that look like in practice?
Well, right now, a lot of farmers don't have reliable access to milk collection centers.
Yeah.
In their villages, so they have to transport the milk long distances, which obviously adds to their costs. And it also increases the risk of spoilage.
So having more local collection centers would not only be more convenient for the farmers,
Right.
but it would also ensure the quality and freshness of the milk.
Right.
So it's a win-win.
Exactly. And then there's marketing. A lot of farmers feel like they don't have much control over the prices. because they're at the mercy of middlemen. So they're calling for stronger milk cooperatives. That would help them market their milk together and get a fairer price.
So basically, they're looking for ways to gain more control over their livelihoods in terms of production and distribution.
Exactly. And knowledge is power, right? Another interesting point they make is the need for more training programs on modern dairy farming techniques.
So it's not just about giving them money or building facilities, but also about making sure they have the knowledge and skills they need to thrive.
Yeah, exactly.
So what kind of training are they looking for specifically?
Or they're interested in things like breeding practices, animal health management, efficient feed utilization, so it's like that. They know that staying competitive means they need to constantly be learning and adopting new practices.
You can't keep doing things the same way and expect to get different results.
Right.
So they're clearly aware of that.
Yeah, and they're also advocating for improvements in veterinary services. And it's not just about reducing costs, but about having access to qualified vets who can actually help them keep their herds healthy and productive.
It sounds like a more holistic approach to animal care that prioritizes preventative measures and early intervention.
Yeah, exactly. And they're really thinking ahead about the long-term sustainability of their businesses. One thing that really stood out to me was their suggestion to establish a dedicated fund for dairy farmers. That could be used for things like disaster relief or to help out during a crisis.
Almost like creating their own safety net, because farming is so unpredictable.
Right. And it's really impressive, this level of foresight.
I agree. They're not just reacting to the current problems, but they're thinking of long-term solutions.
Exactly. And it's not just about them either. They're concerned about the broader community and the environment, too.
That's a good point. We've been talking a lot about the economics, but what about the environmental impact of dairy farming? The study mentions that too, right?
It does. And this is where it gets really interesting, because it links back to what we were saying earlier about modern farming techniques. The farmers know that. Some traditional practices can hurt the environment. Things like deforestation, water pollution. So they want to learn about sustainable farming methods to help minimize those negative impacts while still being able to make a living.
So it's not about choosing between economic viability and environmental responsibility. They see them as interconnected.
Exactly. They're not just dairy farmers. They're stewards of the land.
Right.
And they're starting to see how important their role is in the bigger picture.
It's inspiring to see that. They're taking ownership and looking for solutions that benefit everyone.
Absolutely. And it's a good reminder that farmers are often at the forefront of these global challenges. Their voices are important. They have so much knowledge that can help us make better decisions and move toward a more sustainable future.
We've covered a lot of ground here today.
Yeah, we have.
Exploring both the challenges and the potential solutions.
And it's important to remember, these are just some of the highlights. And the research paper has a lot more detail and nuanced insights. But what really impressed me was that despite all the challenges they face, the farmers aren't giving up. They're innovative, resourceful, and they're determined to build a better future for themselves and their communities.
That brings us to a really important question for you, the listener. What can we learn from these farmers' experiences?
Yeah.
It's easy to feel disconnected from these issues when we're so far away, but we're all part of this global food system, and the choices we make as consumers have an impact on farmers all over the world.
That's right. Every time you buy milk, you're kind of voting for a certain kind of dairy industry.
Right.
Like, are you looking for the cheapest milk, or are you willing to pay a little more for milk from farms that are doing things sustainably and treating their workers fairly?
It's like that saying, vote with your wallet.
Exactly.
But it's not just about buying the right products. It's also about staying informed and advocating for change.
Yeah, absolutely. We should be asking questions about where our food comes from, how it's produced, what kind of impact it has on the environment and on society.
So it's a combination of individual action and collective action. We can make conscious choices as consumers, and at the same time, we can push for bigger changes that make the whole system more sustainable and more just.
Right. It's not about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about being aware, being engaged, and being willing to learn.
It's about recognizing that we're all connected and that the choices we make here can have a ripple effect all over the world.
One of the things I found really impressive about these farmers was their willingness to adapt and to try new things. They're always looking for ways to improve. I think we could all learn something from that.
Absolutely. We can all be a little more like those farmers, curious, resourceful, and committed to finding solutions that work for everybody. And with the planet.
So to wrap up our deep dive into dairy farming in India, we want to leave you with this thought.
What can you do in your own life to support a more sustainable and a more equitable food system?
It's a good question. And remember, even small changes can make a difference.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
See you next time.